Hey everybody, so I'm actually starting a podcast and I'm calling it Rambling CG because I tend to ramble a lot and we're talking about CG, so I figured Rambling CG would be a good name. So yeah, this is going to be the first episode of hopefully a lot of episodes to come because I'm going to try to do this about once every month. And in this first episode, I did an interview with Pim Hendriks, and we talked for about 1.5 hours about a whole host of subjects. So not just about CG, the work itself, but we also talked about moving abroad for work and like Pim's experience in that in that regard. Also about education within the CG industry and a whole host of other topics. I thought it was a super interesting conversation. I really hope you enjoy. And without further ado, let's just dive in. All right, everybody, we're here with Pim Hendriks. First time doing this type of thing, but I was talking to Pim and he was like, "Oh, you should do one of these videos with someone on the show." And I was like, "Oh, do you want to be interviewed?" So here he is. So yeah, Pim, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, your background? What do you do?
I love how energetic you started with the intro. Well, a little bit about me. I mean, I had my beginnings in BUAS, which is an education here in the Netherlands, where I started out with knowing nothing about CG or 3D, anything. And I was pretty much trained into being a 3D generalist, I'd say. From there, I didn't start working in the Netherlands. I started working in Belgium in a film company. And from there, we moved to Canada, worked in film there. And then I was headhunted by Ubisoft in games. And that's pretty much when I made my switch from film into games. And now I've gone full circle and I'm back at the BUAS in Breda University of Applied Sciences, where I teach CG fundamentals to first years and pretty much organize texturing workshops. I invite industry over for guest lectures. We have company visits, not right now, of course. And we have a lot of internships around the well, not right now around the globe. We had them around the globe, and now usually it's personal projects and it's off-site internships. We have some on-site internships, but that's about it. That's my career path so far in a really short nutshell.
Yeah, but I think you have a pretty interesting sort of career path because you kind of went through a lot of different things. Like you started doing like more VFX, and then you went into games, which is something I don't know anything about. So I think that should be pretty interesting to talk about. But like, what would you describe yourself? Because you mentioned you would call yourself a generalist, but like I know you like a more of like a lighting, shading, material authoring. I guess like what I guess that's the main thing you do now, or would you really describe yourself as a generalist still?
It's difficult to say. I think it's like an identity that you connect to yourself, right? So I think I graduated as a student or a graduate interested or moving towards generalism, where I think I graduated in post-production for film. And so that's the natural consequence of that was to also get a job in compositing or something for film, which I did for a little while. But then, being in something like a job like that with a high turnover rate, you sort of look a little wider. And then I sort of fell into Lookdevelopment, which is texturing and surfacing and a little bit of lighting. And so pretty much focused on that for a while. And I think, I'm not sure if I can say I became a specialist in that. I don't think working for 4 or 5 years in a field like that makes you a real specialist. But at least that was my focus on it. And then in between, I did freelance compositing jobs. I did some small teaching jobs here and there to teach students, for example, in Canada, some NAD students, basics of materials. And of course, I've also rigged and I've animated a little bit, though that shouldn't have a name at all. So I think if we're talking title specifically, I'm a senior texture artist, because that's the last title that I had in industry. So I know a lot about textures, I know about materials, and I know how they behave in 3D packages.
Yeah.
if we're talking about generalism, I know how to go from concept to a final product in a game. So in that sense, it's also a generalist. But let's say I'm a senior texture artist, a material artist that has worked in film as a shader artist or minor roles as lighting artist.
Yeah, okay, I kind of understand what you mean, because I would probably say the same about myself. I mean, I do a little bit everything, but I have like a focus on FX type things, but I still do all of the other things. But yeah, like I mentioned, like in those bigger companies, you kind of get pushed or you kind of push yourself into a certain direction. Like what made you roll exactly into the look dev side? Like what interests you the most about doing that and like creating materials?
I think at that point I didn't choose to become a surfacing artist or a texturing artist. I think that was at that point the job that was offered to me. And since I had already, I was interested in the whole range of things. I think I wasn't as technical as I am now. I'm still not very technical, but I'd say I'm far more technical than I was then. So texturing being a sort of painterly job, it was more accessible than other jobs, and then from there, there's some depth to be discovered. So to answer your question shortly, I didn't choose; it was chosen for me at that company since I was very new there. But it suited me. It was a nice job. I could learn a lot, and also I think this is also something that I tend to pass on to my students. Texturing itself seems to be a very isolated or insulated position in a company, but actually you need a lot of knowledge about modeling, about topology, about how UVs work, what you can do with UVs, what the end result is going to be, how lighting is going to respond to it. So, I think it sounds like an insulated job, texturing, but that's why I have difficulty saying I'm a texture artist only, because it requires such a large base of knowledge. The same thing's for you, true. I think.
Yeah. So I guess you're saying, like you have a focus, but like all of the other things really play into it, and I think that will probably makes you a better artist than if you were to only do that. I think like probably if you have like more of a general background, it will probably also help even in your specialization down the road. Like if you understand all of these other things.
Yeah, I think maybe, I find it difficult to say for film or games specifically, but I've noticed in my role at companies that in a lot of times that, little trickeries really help the final product. So let's say if you only follow the rules set by, I don't know, some physical based model, right, PBR or something, if you only follow those rules, end result's always going to be very predictable. So if you have that little bit of extra knowledge to move around, to be creative with the rules, that gives you a lot more freedom in achieving, maybe the end result that the art director wants, or maybe some effect that otherwise wouldn't be helpful. Or maybe let's say if we're doing a collaborative thing, you'd be giving me a lava simulation, and you're giving me all these points, these data points to drive, these attributes to drive the shader with. If I don't know about that, I wouldn't be able to make that. Wouldn't be able to use that. So
yeah. And do you like, is there like I don't really know much about games, but is there a big difference like how you approach stuff like that for games or for VFX? Because like I know if I do stuff, like I fake like as much as I can, like as long as it ends up in the render like correctly and there's issues. I mean, you can fix it in compositing, but I can assume that's different for games. But like I'm not sure like what the difference then, like if you're doing materials, like how big of the difference would it be? I mean, you're still creating PBR materials, I guess. So like how big is the difference between VFX games? Could you go?
I think if you'd be asking me this 6 years ago, 7 years ago, I'd say there was a huge difference. I'm not sure if that was because I had no experience in working in film, because my education was games, or if it was because there wasn't any software that was pulling the two closer together. Now, I would say it's quite similar. I think the workflow is similar. The considerations are similar. I'm talking about specifics. I'm not talking about texture space or available RAM. I mean, there's still a big difference between driving something offline and driving an online renderer. But we're getting, I think, visually, we're getting so very close to what the results in games or film could be, that I think the only really strong difference right now is in terms of if we're going for like photorealistic rendering, which is something that offline renderers still do much better out of the box and would need a lot more attention in online renderers. I think talking textures and materials specifically, I think the creation of them is very similar right now. I mean, with Substance Painter taking, the texturing world by storm, I think Mari still has its purposes. Sure, it absolutely does. But I think there's such a strong focus on, high quality art generation at a really rapid speed. And there's so many different libraries like Megascans and Substance Source that provide these materials on the fly. You just, you pick them and drop them. That's being used for both film and games. I think for texturing and shading, there's not much of a difference anymore, except for output.
Okay, but like I have one question, for example, regarding it. Like, because if you're doing stuff for film, like you might use 8K, 16K textures, you're gonna have all this detail. But if you're gonna do stuff for games, you're gonna work for the lowest common denominator, I guess, which might be some kind of potato machine. And then you're gonna,
microwave.
Yeah, but then your textures are also gonna be, you're gonna have super low res textures, and they still, I guess, need to be readable, even at a low resolution. So I guess that might be a little bit different. Or don't you experience it like that?
Yeah, that's you would experience that, but usually that optimization process is not done by the artists themselves. You're building LODs, right? But in a lot of cases, do you know what LODs are? Level of detail nodules. Okay, so
I guess maybe if the viewers don't know, you could get into a little bit about how they work.
Level of detail pretty much means that you're adding a variety of meshes that look like your highest quality mesh that are then swapped for lower quality meshes as based on viewing distance. So that same concept is true for film, where you would say, for example, let me just say one thing before I start into this. Usually we don't use anything more than 4K texture maps. 8K texture maps, personally, I try to avoid it at all times, because if you're using something that big, your screen resolution in this, when you're watching a movie is 4K-ish, I think movies are made for 4K images, screens right now. So I'd say using a 4K texture map, you'd have to use one area of space that's only one element then that's being rendered on screen. So I would say if we're talking about screen space, real estate, let's say, I'd say 4K is about the maximum, and then you just start dividing your texture map into UDIMs, and then X amount of UDIMs, whatever. But then, so we were talking about LODs. That same thing is true for texture maps, where you have sort of a pyramid scheme of smaller and smaller and smaller divisions of that texture map. But then also as a texture artist, you wouldn't make that. You would save it out as an optimized texture map, but you wouldn't actively make that. The same is true for modeling, I'd say, in games, where you would save out your texture map or save out your model, and then some engines, like I think Unreal actually does this, where you import the mesh, it automatically makes LODs for you.
Yeah, oh, sorry. Yeah, continue.
No, go ahead.
Oh, yeah, I wanted to ask, like, is that the automatic LOD thing the new thing that they showed with the new demo for the new Unreal, or is that something that was already there? Like, they showed something with the, there's like...
I think it was already there.
Yeah, because did you see the demo for Unreal 5? I guess you did, with the... where it's like unlimited detail, and then was downscaling it, and that seems really cool. But do you have thoughts on that? For example, like, do you think that's more of a marketing thing, or do you think like something like that could be
sure.
really?
I don't know. I'm not that technical with regard to how the polygons are rendered, and But what I think I read, obviously, I think that's a marketing term, right? If we look at like the previous development in Unreal. It took a year or two before Unreal 4 had all the elements that was set it would have on release, or at least maybe they were a shell of what they were supposed to be, but they were there, but they needed improvements. I think the same thing is true for Unreal 5. I mean, what they showed is ridiculous, right? It's totally cool.
I mean, it's still gonna be kind of marketing-ish speech, I guess. But it's still, I mean, if I look at it, like not knowing anything about real-time stuff, it did look really cool, and it does make me want to go sort of into... By the way, did you, about talking about Unreal, did you see the news yesterday about what Epic has bought a share into side effects? Did you see that? So they're
I didn't see it. I think didn't you send that to me? No, you put that on Twitter, I think.
Oh yeah. I put it. Yeah, so
I saw that.
Yeah, so I'm wondering where that's heading, and now I also feel like I should maybe. I was already thinking that, like I should get into real time at some point, but it's scary.
I think at some point it's not going to matter. I think there's not many tools that are really destructive, right? I think Houdini is one of those tools that's really like. I call it destructive. I'm not sure if it's actually destructive, but what it does a lot of things that other software also does, but it does it better, right? And it almost feels, I'm not sure if it is, but it feels like it's created to own everything, right?
What do you mean by that?
I mean by own everything, I mean that it tries to do what other software does, but better and smarter.
Yeah, okay.
And by doing so, it disqualifies the use of that software.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
You see what I mean? I'm not saying that it's malicious. I don't mean it's the development cycle of that software. They try to make it as good as it can be, but I perceive it as destructive because it makes certain software packages that I've spent years working on irrelevant. Yeah,
but I get that's just also the sort of like technology changes and I mean, even if you spend years working on like a certain program and you have certain skills that you know, which is probably like how to do stuff, even if you apply it into another program, I mean the underlying skills don't change. Like if you know how to do something in a certain program, the underlying concepts change. I guess the difference maybe in Houdini is a little bit like if you're like a more like an artistic driven guy and you come from Maya and then you come to Houdini, that might be, I guess, a very big jump because in Maya you press more, you're more a button presser, so to say. And in Houdini you're kind of doing the underlying technical stuff, so I guess that might be, I guess, different. But if you're talking about...
Don't you come from Cinema 4D?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've used a lot of different stuff over the years, but like mainly Cinema 4D the years before I did Houdini. I mean, I was always interested in technical stuff though, but yeah.
How was that switch for you?
Well, difficult. Well, I mean, different. Because for me it was more like I'm always like in between art and technical stuff. Like I'm quite technical, but I'm not like at the TD type level technical. So I'm like kind of in between. And I've used I used 3ds Max at some point. I used Modo. I've used Cinema 4D, and that was all pretty straightforward to like use these different programs. Houdini was just a different mindset. And it did take me like 6 months to sort of grasp, I guess, the sort of the way of working. It took about a year to be sort of comfortable in it, which I think is probably somewhat like similar experience to other people. I'm not sure because you also use some Houdini. I'm not sure how much you use it. Do you like? Do you use it often nowadays, or is it like occasional?
No, it's my role over the past few years has always been texture artist. I know that you can create textures in Houdini, and I know that you can do it similar to, for example, Substance Designer, which is my preferred tool. But I never felt like the focus of Houdini was to create textures.
Yeah, no, it's not.
But I do use it sometimes to create randomization in my models. Like when I make a model and I want to make variations, I'll put it in Houdini and I'll use a couple of deformers to move some stuff around. Before, I've used it for the generation of terrains. For example, I've made a long time ago when I was still studying.
When you were a wee lad, sorry.
when I was tiny,
tiny Pim.
I made a trench generator, a World War I trench generator, which I would generate the terrain, and then on top of that, I would generate trenches, and then those would be carved into the terrain. Then the mesh would be cleaned, and then I would make all these. I had a really big document. What was it called? It was called a dependency document, or it was like a hierarchical structure upon which should what element be built for it to be, collaborative with the whole. What was it called again? I'm not sure what it was called. And then that's pretty much the extent of my use with Houdini.
Yeah. Okay.
But I do like. I mean, I'm always interested in procedural content. You know about this. I think I asked you to speak at our Everything Procedural conference. Just carefully plugging that if that's okay
Everything
with you.
Procedural.
Yeah. So, which is a super cool conference in which we invite programmers to talk about procedural content, or like technical artists to talk about procedural content. It's really, I mean, this year we couldn't let it go
because of the COVID,
because of the Rona. But no, a year before was awesome, and the year before that was awesome, and we have Side Effects as a sponsor, and I think we had Ubisoft and PUBG, the company in Amsterdam. We had them as a sponsor, so it's super cool, and it's
I was there in 2016. That was a lot of fun. So, but is it gonna go ahead next year? Do you already have a date, or not sure yet because of the?
Everything's really uncertain, right? There's bound to be limitations to how many people we can have over. So maybe it's going to be a completely online event. I don't think anything's been decided yet. I mean, I'm talking right now with people that may be interested in coming, speaking at least. But we'd have to see if that's going to be in an online fashion, or if it's going to be that they in person come over and maybe do a master class. We had a master class 2 years ago. I don't know yet. It's really difficult to say.
Yeah, well, at least I'm excited, and you should be excited as well if you're watching. So, I guess so. Let's get a little bit back on track, because I mean you recently, like last time when we actually met in person, you were working on this project with the I forgot the name now from the top of my mind. You mentioned also that used Redshift and stuff. You did a whole bunch of materials for that, and I saw the making of, and it looked super cool. So
it's looking really sweet.
Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about like how was that process? Because it's first maybe explain like what the project actually is, like what it's about, what it's called, and then.
So in Dutch it's called Vliegende Hollanders, so Flying Dutchmen. In English, I don't know. I have to Google this. You Google it, or
I guess
it.
I guess they could have. Wait, let me. Yeah, well, I'll Google.
I don't know for sure. Yeah,
I guess Flying Dutchman. I can wait. I'll look it up. Flying Dutchman series.
As a little sub.
Yeah, let's see if it's okay, no, it lists a book. Okay,
Flying Skies, something with skies. Flying Skies? No.
We'll look it up later.
Turbulent Skies. I think that's it.
Turbulent Skies. Wait, let me check if it's actually so. Turbulent Skies series. Turbulent Skies series. Oh, it does show up as something in series. Okay. I think it's Turbulent Skies. Right. So
okay, good.
We got it.
It's like somewhere all the way in the back of my head.
Yeah.
So pretty much what the work was is that the models they had hired someone to make photogrammetry assets of real planes in museum. And then using that photogrammetry data, they would make really high density 3D models of it. So perfectly modeled planes with like bolts on the engines and like all the radiators. They were like modeled. It was like damn near perfect modeling. And then that asset would be then receive a single texture pass. So it would receive a simple roughness. It would receive a simple base color. And then it would be my task to prep the whole plane for production quality. So close-ups, shots really far away. UVs will be laid out. So I wouldn't have to bother with UVs. Of course, if something was, impossible to do for a shot, then I would have to send it back. I don't think I was doing any UV retakes on my own. Maybe I made some suggestions for UV retakes, but I didn't do them myself. And then it was simply just prepping them for shots that are far away, so really far away, and then shots that are, pretty much as close as taking a piece of paper, my little Canadian flag, and
Canada,
like this. Hey, so it was pretty much just everything had to be mastered at 4K.
Yeah.
And then 4K with pixel precision on, like, for example, little droplets or little dust particles, maybe some heat elements from like exhausts from the plane itself. They had to be mastered with. Sometimes they were made purely only out of canvas. So there's a plane called the Farman. The Farman.
Wait 1 second. I'm gonna in the meantime I'm gonna look up if they have. Wait, I'm gonna put on the making of. Wait 1 second. Turbulent. Want then you can see the.
Yeah, maybe you can play this under the explanation.
Yeah, I'm just gonna put.
Or we run the video.
Yeah, I'm looking it up now on my second screen. Wacht, vliegende Hollandisch. Making of the CG. Oh wait, you had it on Vimeo, right? It was on Vimeo, or.
Oh, it's not mine. I didn't upload
no, but
it's,
like Planet X, I think did. Let me see if.
Yeah. I could also share my screen and go to my ArtStation.
Yeah, sure.
There.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Let's see. How do I share my screen in Zoom?
Oh, yeah, you can. On the bottom, there should be some like a button.
You disabled sharing.
Oh, I did. Wait.
Host.
Advanced. Wait.
Host.
Advanced sharing. Multiple monitor can share simultaneous. Okay, maybe. Okay, maybe you can you try it now?
Yeah.
Does it work?
Oh, there we go. Okay.
Sick.
Yeah, it does.
Okay. I don't see anything though. I see your face.
Wait 1 second. My entire screen or Chrome tab. There we go. Share my Chrome tab.
Oh no! I see my. Oh wait. Okay. Oh yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It works. Okay. It's on full screen, and now we're both on my recording on the other screen. Okay, that's fine. Okay, play it.
That works. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Should I play it? Okay.
Or you can go to the through the screenshots.
I'll go through the pictures. Yeah.
Yeah. That's
so pretty much the contents of these plates, like the materials themselves, they weren't really complex. I mean, it's just wood or canvas or some metals. Some other elements were more interesting. For example, the anisotropic hull of the plane that required a little bit more attention. So my approach to this was mainly just to build these shaders procedurally. So it wasn't done. The rendering was all done in Houdini and Redshift. But the shaders we would just be using standard shaders, right? We wouldn't run many. I think we didn't even run any shader effects in the shader itself. It was all just texturing, which makes it also a lot lighter.
So it was it was all just just procedural materials from Substance, and then into Redshift just as a no.
So there's a thing in Substance Painter called Smart Materials. Mm-hmm. So what that is pretty much it's a material. So a material consists out of X amount of texture layers. So roughness, albedo, normal, height, and what we do is I would set up a material or a smart material, and a smart material consists out of multiple of those materials. And I would all give them like triplanar properties, like triplanars, or maybe sometimes based on UV space orientation. I would sample, I would render out a UV map to figure out what the rotation was of the UV space, and then based on that, I would rotate my incoming texture based on the orientation of the shell. So anything that I was receiving, I would immediately be able to put into Substance Painter, take all the data from that I needed to make sure that at least the base of all my materials that I was setting up would automatically go well. And then on top of that, I would have a couple smart materials with some masking inputs, where if I would paint, for example, I don't know if you can see this. Let's see.
It's for me. For me, it's really small because I can only see it in my OBS that I'm recording in.
Okay.
Like on my main screen, it shows you and me side by side. So
so maybe later on you can.
Yeah.
Okay.
So for
anyway,
me,
there's some effects on the hull that where dust collection takes place, or like some scuffing from the speed of the plane, right, where the paint starts falling off. That type of stuff I would drive with the black and white texture map, which would just be a mask where I paint in or out certain details, and that's pretty much my whole setup. So I tried to make it so simple that the only thing that you had to do was relatively carefully paint in white values, and then all the rest would be automatically generated based on that. So and all these little dents, you can't see it, but
and I guess the painting of those maps, you do that in Substance Painter then, or did you do it or did you paint the stuff in Houdini with attributes, or like to mix, or what did you?
No, we didn't do anything in Houdini, actually. All of this stuff is all of the surface materials are generated in Painter, and they are. I mean, we didn't even have a big shader graph. Quite literally, all we had a material, and then directly into the material were all the texture maps being fed in, and that's it. And that would generate the material for the planes. This is the one that I was talking about. So this one was kind of funny. It didn't have those internal ribs. So what I did was I made a subsurface scattering map to make sure that we were simulating those ribs.
Oh.
So that's just a texture map that's simply not allowing light to pass through.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, that seemed to work pretty well.
So the model itself was just only the plane, and then you had the material where it would just really absorb a lot of light where the metal pieces were.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So how many planes were there about in total?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't know how many planes there were in total. At some point, my regular day job started again. I did this during a summer holiday.
I remember that you were super busy back then.
Yeah. I think I worked on this 2 months, I think. And I set up all the smart materials for at least all of these planes, and then also for this one. I set up a smart material for the DC model. So, oops, that's a little. Did you hear that? That was very loud.
No, I didn't. I don't hear it. It's probably on your head. And by smart material, you just mean the substance material where you can change parameters and stuff. That's with the stuff promoted to the top level, right? Where you can like more grunge, less this. Yeah, okay.
Yeah. And you'd have to sort of imagine this to be. So if I would separate this into smart materials, right? I would say, for example, I would make a smart material for this canvas, for the blue canvas, for example. Then I would make a smart material for the blue metals. Then I would make a smart material for the differently colored metals, because that paint will have a different fall off and a different reach and a different finale and all this stuff. Then another smart material for the anisotropic stuff. So pretty much every material had its own smart material with a multi-layered setup. And then on top of that, of course, I wouldn't be able to run this on my machine, right? I'd have like 40 UDIMs, and then all of them would be 4K, and then all of them would be consisting out of, I don't know, like 20 layers or 25 layers. So what I would do is I would have an intermediary.
That is definitely the type of stuff that you wouldn't do in a game.
No. So, well, this outlines exactly what you would do in a game and what you wouldn't do in a game. So this is something you wouldn't do in a game. At some point, my scene would be so heavy, or my plane would be so heavy, I would have to render out an intermediary. And then I would import that intermediary into a, whatever the plane was called in my new Substance Painter file. And then I would import that plane and import all those texture maps that I put out. And then I have, let's say, I think I had another library of about 10 or 12 smart materials that I could paint in. So I would paint in scuffing, stretch marks, paint watermarked water droplets, maybe some dirt, some soil, and other types of damage, I guess. And then that would then be the final, the finaling of that texture, and then we do an export and we do some test renders.
That's cool. Yeah, so I guess like that's one of those things that you wouldn't like be able to do in games, at least not yet, until everybody has a graphics card with 96 gigabytes of VRAM or something crazy.
Or like you have your crazy machine. I was watching your build video yesterday evening.
Oh yeah, it's the ongoing and I also have the 3090 in now. Well, I guess you saw in the
I saw that in the video.
Thing. Yeah, so that thing is pretty crazy. Still need to water cool it, but super happy that.
Which CPU is that? That's a Threadripper what?
Oh yeah, I have the 3970X. So it's the 32 core model. So 32 core, 64 threads. I got that instead of the 64 core part. Yeah, because I guess from games like if you have if you have a lot of cores that are lower clocked, it's not necessarily always better. And for I figured that a lot of stuff I do is not necessarily better to have 64 cores. So I figured the 32 core part would be better.
What's your base speed?
The base speed of the 3970X, I think it was 3.7. So that's 3.7.
That's pretty good.
And I think the max boost I'm getting is 4.3, but for short periods. So it kind of alternates between those. But if you have the 64 core parts, the base speed there is 2.9. So that's also a lot of Houdini work I do. For example, a lot of sub nodes are not multi-threaded. So if you have a couple of sub nodes and you go and run it on your 64 core beast, then it's gonna those nodes are gonna bog down your entire thing. So I figured would be for my use case a little bit better.
Chugging a little bit. Yeah. I understand it. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, I wanted to pivot a little bit from the thing, because you mentioned you also worked at Ubisoft. You worked in at Grid before, and then you went to Ubisoft.
Yeah.
Kind of wanted to hear your experience about moving countries for work, because that's something I noticed in some of the comments of my videos about people saying oh, I want to go remote, go work remote, maybe work for myself, go remote. And personally, for example, that's something I'm boring and I just want to stay live in Holland. But I see a lot of people moving abroad for work. And I wanted to hear your experience about what made you do that, why, and how was it? How was the experience? And
Well, the reason why me and my girlfriend, we moved to Canada, there's a plethora of reasons really, and I think a lot of them you also covered in your video about burnout, and we were a little tired with being in Belgium, and personally I couldn't find a job that I really wanted to work at in the Netherlands. I think at that time still the Netherlands is not really a hot spot for film, and there's such a back and forth with that little subsidy thing that now it's there, then it isn't there, and then some people get it, other people don't get it. So it was quite difficult to find something like that. And so we were just thinking, let's move somewhere. It was just we felt like moving, I guess. There's no real other way of explaining it. We felt like moving somewhere else. So I started applying in the UK, and I started applying in Canada. And at first I didn't receive any replies, right? You send a message to, I sent a message to DNAG and to Framestore and some other smaller Pixelmondo. And I was either denied or I never heard a thing back. And then I received a reply from a company in Montreal called Migros. And first they said, we're not looking for someone of your level. Okay. And then a week later, I got a reply with a contract.
Oh,
So like,
okay.
Point.
So the first we're not looking, and now there you go, contract. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And then things went really fast, really fast. We were still in Belgium, so we had to cancel. We wanted to start from the Netherlands because we found that Belgium is a really nice country, but everything is done in paperwork. So
in what?
Things take a long paperwork. So it's analog. So if you do want to do something at the municipality or like I don't know what that's called, the house of the city.
Yeah. Okay. Just like
whatever. Yeah, it takes a long time, right? It takes a really long time. So what we did, we tried to be fast with this. We knew we were going to move someplace, so we try to cancel everything as fast as possible and start everything up again in the Netherlands. So we got about 80%. I still have a Belgian bank account after all these years. I don't know how to cancel it.
I have to. I still have a Scottish bank account. I never canceled.
Oh, really?
It. Yeah.
Well, I don't. Apparently, I don't have to pay for it, so that's good. But so we went back to the Netherlands. There was a lot of stuff to arrange. You're sort of on like this. You're on this train that goes, and you're not really thinking about it. You're just doing and doing and doing and doing and doing, until we got there. That was a little bit of a funny story. We were looking for apartments because the company that I was going to, Migros, they couldn't guarantee me a place, but they could guarantee me an Airbnb to stay at until I found a place. But we thought we're going to be proactive. We're going to find a place before we move there. So we got a place. We found a place. Really nice landlord. She sent us the rent contract through FedEx to the Netherlands because it has to be on specific paper.
Okay.
Thick paper.
Okay.
We sign it. We use the same service. We send it back. So before we got there, we had an apartment, but we didn't have a key. So, okay, I asked my friend who's already there, can you take the key? Because we can't take it. She doesn't want to send it. She doesn't want to leave at like a store around. So my friend says, okay, I'll take the key. He's also the one that checked out the apartment to check whether or not it was real, whether or not we were being catfished or not. And so everything checks out. We're like, this is solid. So we take a flight early morning. Flight is about, we had a skip on Iceland. So I think flight was about 11 hours or something with the break in between before we landed. We're there in customs. And there's this, customs is intimidating. Especially when you go to a country you've never been there, you have everything with you. There's no one there that you know except this one guy. And there's this icy lady with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes asking questions. I'm like, I'm trying to be a little bit funny or lighthearted. That's not appreciated. And so I think we landed around 6 or something, or 6:30. We spend until 11:30 there. Then we have to get a cab to the address of our new condo. We get there, my friend's not there. I'm like, shit, I'm in a city, I don't know anybody.
Yeah.
I have no idea where I am exactly. I don't have any internet. I can't contact anyone. My mobile internet has depleted because I forgot to turn it off when we left the Netherlands and we landed in Montreal. There's no way I can do anything right now, and we're there in front of the door with 4 big suitcases. Waiting for like someone. Hi, I'm a foreigner. Rob me, please. And then I asked the taxi driver, can you help me send a text message to this address, or can I call someone using your mobile phone? He says, okay, yeah, sure. So I call my friend. He says I'm on my way, and then everything settles. Everything's okay. We get into our condo. We have the keys. So I would recommend take the company up on the offer. Go to an Airbnb. Get picked up at the airport, because none of that is relevant right now because there's COVID. But once COVID's gone, do that, because the way I did it was really stressful. That was I think in hindsight that was a bad idea. That could have gone wrong.
Yeah. And how was your experience? And how was your experiences in general? Like then being in Canada and like not knowing anybody. Well, I guess you quickly make friends like in a studio, but like how was that experience?
Well, it's not as easy. I can't pretend that everything was great and fun. The work was fun. The team that I had was fun, and the collaboration was really nice. But it's very difficult to get your feet on the ground in a country that you don't know. Especially because, in all of these places, right? Let's say you go to Belgium. Of course, there's a lot of Belgian people working in the company. The same is true for every country, really. So if you go into it with the expectation that you're going to make friends with everyone, that you're going to have a lot of people around you, that's not a right expectation. Unless you go there and you already have a lot of friends there, that's a legitimate expectation. The way we went in is I expected the environment to be a little more hospitable, friendly, inclusive. It was a little less than I expected. So for a long time, there weren't that many contexts that we could hang out with. I had a good time though. I would do it again, no question about it. But I would go into it with a little different expectation, because when you end up in a place where they all have established relationships, right? They all have their friends, they have their family, they're married, they have kids. You come in, you're 25, or I think I was 25 or 6, and you're there, and nobody wants to hang out after work. Yeah. And then on Friday, people have 1 or 2 drinks, and then they go home. That needs some getting used to. That's not what you're used to at that age. So it's like a maturing process a little bit at the start.
Yeah, I guess for you, I mean, you moved there with your girlfriend, so I guess that kind of makes it like if you were to go alone in that case, I guess that would have kind of sucked.
I think so. Yeah, if you don't adjust your expectations, for sure. Yeah, I think I don't want to plug the university a little bit, but I'm gonna. It's a
plug ahead, man. I mean,
yeah. Okay. So what we do at the university when we have people that want to go on internships is we try to make this as realistic as possible for them. That starts with the way they set up their portfolios. How do you address your portfolio when you apply to a studio? What do you include? What do you don't include? But also, how do you mentally prepare for a placement like this? It's not just work. It's way more than work. You're there 24 hours a day, but you're working 8 or 9, right? All the other hours you have to do something, right? At the start, it's going to be filled with things that you have to register, you get a SIN number, you got to get an insurance, you got to get, all this other stuff. But it's the same with moving a city. You don't know anything, you don't know anyone. Maybe you do know someone. It's likely that you won't get a buddy or a mentor. So a lot of this stuff has to come from you. So this is sort of a portion of how how do you guide someone into it? I think if you do this for an internship, of course, it's different than when you're doing this for a job. If you move in somewhere for a job, it's, I guess, you're a little bit more familiar with how a working environment looks like. But if you're doing this as an intern, it's going to be very new, very, very engaging, I'd say, but not necessarily positive. It's a very big step. I think, and as well as if you've never worked abroad and then you go abroad, the same is true. You've been in this inclusive environment for a long time, and then you go to an environment where you're sort of always, I wouldn't say you're not the ugly duckling, but you're just not part of the club.
Yeah,
that becomes a challenge, right? That's a challenge that you some people can overcome, other people can't overcome. I went back after 2 years, a little less. I went back after 2 years spending in Canada, not because I didn't like my job, but because at some point it became, I wasn't really touching base anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's
then you're kind of I guess a digital gypsy or something like that. Like you're sort of you're kind of on the move, but like you kind of live there. You're kind of on the move. You're not really settled there, and you're not have the feeling that you're like, I'm not gonna be here forever. Probably I don't feel like I want to be here forever, and then that also makes it more difficult, I guess, to sort of settle down in a certain spot.
Yeah, and the idea is reinforced by the way that, for example, you don't that language that they speak is not your first language, and very often if you don't, like for example, don't go to Quebec if you don't speak French or you don't understand French. Yeah, you'll be excluded all the time, the whole time. It's not that these people don't want you. They're very nice and they're very kind and they're very inclusive, but it's like in the Netherlands, when you spend a night with 10 friends who are Dutch, you're having 6 beers, and one of you is Spanish or something. That Spanish guy or girl, at some point, some people in that group will talk Dutch to each other.
Yeah, and then
it doesn't matter that it's not. Yeah, it doesn't matter that it's not to the Spanish person, but the Spanish person, they will feel excluded.
Yeah. Yeah,
and you do that on a daily basis, and then.
Yeah, then eventually you're kind of that's what you guys do right in at the university you work at. Is like everybody speaks English now, right? Like sort of include everybody, like even if it's a Dutch group. They also, because when I went to Everything Procedural a couple of years ago, that's also something like I noticed, like even the Dutch groups were speaking English all the time. And I was like, why are you doing that? Like, but it's enforced there to sort of like do that to include everybody. I
wouldn't say it's not enforced, but we make it a very...
not enforced, but I mean, it's kind of a recommended.
We're expecting it. Yeah. Well, we have, it sounds a little bit funny, but we have learning objectives, right? So we grade students on learning objectives. We don't tell them you need to be able to model a bench or something, but we have a learning objective that says student is capable of creating a bench by self-guided study, by understanding fundamentally what makes a bench, construction or elements in CG. And so based on that, we can also sort of cater that towards student is inclusive, socially responsible, professional in his way or her way of developing their own environment, let's say.
Yeah.
And so with that in mind, I mean, of course, it's not demanded, but it is a way of measuring professionality in the sense that how inclusive are you towards your environment. Yeah, and we have a lot of international students, so it's actually really important.
Because that's something over there. Like you guys are like, you actually have a lot of people coming in from other countries to your school, which is not necessarily the case for a lot of other studies here in the Netherlands. I mean, I studied in the Netherlands. I wouldn't say that the study I did was particularly great. But I think, I mean, from NLTV, like I heard quite okay stories, and I think that's it does attract people from other places as well to come there. And it's because
it sounds a little funny, but I'm actually a little proud to be working there. I think we have a very healthy student culture. At least I can only speak for our little domain, right? Our own games domain and or creative media. But I think we have a very healthy way of also maintaining student-lecturer relations. I think we do.
Yeah, and also I kind of want to pivot to that a little, because like, I mean, we've been talking about your work and also that you've been teaching, but like, how was it for you to transition from like doing this work and then starting to teach? And like, does it also like, because what I like when I record courses, for example, I also feel like I learn a lot from like the teaching aspect. I guess that might be similar for you, but like, what was your experience going from working in the field to then teaching what you know, and how do you try to stay up to date? Because I guess that's going to be harder if you're not inside the industry anymore to well, I mean, you're still in the industry, but you're not working 40 hours a week on the projects anymore. Like, how do you also stay up to date? Because that's probably difficult if you're
that's a number of questions. Let me just answer them in the order that I think I heard them. the transition was pretty natural. So transition from working full-time in a production art position to working full-time as a lecturer in art position, I feel like that was, I don't know if it's supposed to be that easy, but to me it was very natural. I think partially because I had done training, I'd given training in substance designer, painter. I've made workshops at Ubisoft after working hours for my direct colleagues. We just sit together and I do a quick 15-minute talk, and then we'd work together in whatever software they were learning. I think it's also sort of I don't know if it sounds too braggy, but it's sort of like a natural thing for me. I think for some people as well, that you enjoy explaining things 50 different ways. I think some people get bored with this real fast. They just want to do the work, and they don't want to explain too much. And when they want to explain something, they want to explain it on a really high level, or at least maybe their level. But I always found that even when I was working on my education, like years back, the first year, the second year, I was always trying to explain this stuff to my parents. I don't think they wanted to know. Yeah. But I was always explaining. I was trying to explain it to the best of my capability to my parents, and usually, when I was just learning this stuff, it was, they didn't understand, or my explanation was, really bad. But I was always trying to explain it, and then similarly, to keep myself motivated during my graduation years, I started a blog. That's also how we got in contact, because I was doing real flow stuff, and then you were also doing real flow stuff, and I was trying to explain to myself really, what is this real flow stuff? Why does it work? Why am I creating vorticity maps or velocity maps? What is this stuff? And so I think for me, it's a natural thing to try and explain something in multiple different ways, and that I think aligns pretty well with being a teacher. And then also I like to think about things too much or very deeply. And then for example, if we're talking about situations like moving somewhere, I like to think about that for a long time, and then also reflect on that for a long time. It always comes back into my head. And I think that helps with also explaining it to everybody has a different type of way they understand things. And I think if you reflect a lot on things that happen to you, whether or not it's your fault that it happened to you or not, that expands also your capability of explaining it. I think that's why it came natural to me. Now the way how do I maintain? I don't know if you have a question about that, but how do I maintain my knowledge when I'm not working 40 hours a week? That's a challenge. I think that to me is the biggest challenge. I still feel like I want to make stuff. That's also why I'm trying to freelance as much as I can, even though there's, it's difficult to do that type of stuff when you're
freelance
not
live
available. Yeah, sorry. Exactly. I think what it comes down to is that you're trying to, at least my approach is that I'm trying to be as efficient as I can with the knowledge that I don't have. I try to identify what I don't know, or I try to identify with the things that I struggle with. And, having so many students to sort of measure myself with, not necessarily in terms of skill, but the way they learn or the way they identify things that they're missing, it becomes a little easier to identify also what I'm missing. So I don't think I need 40 hours a week to identify anymore. Maybe I do, actually. Maybe I need 40 hours a week with students to identify what I'm missing. But I think it's easier to identify the stuff that I want to learn, and it's easier to identify the stuff that I need to learn, because I get so much information. Like instead of just having one source or maybe a team of 10 people that are my sources, I now have 200 sources of students that are interested in the same thing that I'm interested in, and they are in this moment in their life where they're still trying to grasp what they find interesting or what they want to do for the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, and they're also probably still highly motivated, because that's something that you sometimes see peaking off after like a while when it really becomes your job, kind of.
Yeah. And it rubs off on me. I mean, that sounds a little weird, but that motivation and that ambition, it rubs off. And I also feel, when I was working 40 hours a week doing textures and surfaces, I wasn't feeling like I wanted to do a personal project on the side. I wasn't feeling like I want to learn whatever this means. I don't want to learn how to code. But now I have like graduation students that I'm supervising, of which a couple are in Ubisoft and some others are in some smaller companies. And that gives me a sense of I want to do what they're doing. I want to sort of feel, well, not necessarily want to, but I can't help it. The way they're talking, like I always talk about this with like, when you're talking to someone who really likes what they're doing and you're having this conversation, one, like your eyes become emissive almost, right? With like this glow, with this
you get like
star,
really
right?
into it. Yeah.
And you get like, I sometimes get what do you call it? Goosebumps, when I'm talking about something that I really, really like. And so when I get that feeling, that's I would say that's the most fulfilling part of being a lecturer.
I kind of recognize what you mean, because like I've been freelancing also now for almost six years, and I do I make courses and stuff on the side, and I started doing that more a lot more this year, because I really also enjoy that sort of the teaching aspect and like interacting with people and people asking me questions. I really notice that I'm much more passionate about that thing. There's a lot of times when I'm doing stuff for a client or whatever, you need to, you're kind of like doing it, but just like it feels like also like really like work. But if I'm making something to also like to teach to others or whatever, like even if I also do personal projects, and then but if I do the personal project and later I make it into a course, then I get to teach it to people, and I really understand what you mean, because that's also much more rewarding to me to be able to sort of do that, and I'm really passionate about that, and I have to say that like typical client work, I've gotten less passionate about doing that. Initially, I was super passionate about that. That's also what I meant with like the students. Like when I was a student, I was like, oh my God, VFX, everything is great, super passionate about that. And then after a while, it's sort of when you do it as a job, it starts becoming a job. And I think it's also sort of important to try to keep it also interesting and like to keep yourself invigorated if you want to keep doing this until you're like retired. And
well, it feels significant. I feel, to me, the word is, I feel like if I'm doing, regular work on a show, it's nice and I really like to do it, and I gloat a little bit about the end product, right? I really like the end product, and I'm really proud of being and part of that, and that I was able to be a part of that. But it doesn't feel as significant as having a student all of a sudden understand what you're talking about, and then feeding that back into like this. I don't know. I don't feel like you can beat that.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like super rewarding also if you help people, and then then suddenly they get it, and then they're like, they're super happy. That's also what I like. I get random messages from people all the time. They watch, for example, my course is like, oh my God, you finally made me understand Houdini. And it's just super cool. Like I'm never going to get a message from a client like, oh my God, you finally made the logo bigger. I'm so happy. I mean,
financial reward is the one that replaces that one.
Yeah, exactly. And it's always sort of I guess you need to have a mix between, I guess, the two. But that's
very true.
But it's so you do see yourself still working in education for a while.
I think it's difficult to say, especially now. I do enjoy it, right? I like doing it. I think I could see myself doing it for at least a couple more years, but it's difficult to say, because right now it also feels like Corona is tying our hands a little bit in terms of you purchase a house, maybe you have a kid. Corona makes sure that if you have a stable contract, you probably want to stick to it for a little while. But if that wouldn't be the case, I think I would still be here for a while. Yeah. Yeah. I think I would try to do more freelance work on the side, or maybe find a way to find a better balance for me. Or a better balance, to find a nice balance between, financial reward and, what do you call the other thing? Significant or relevant?
Yeah. That's
like mental reward.
Yeah, that's a difficult part of that as well. I think I've kind of have the same. That's what I'm trying to do with I'm trying to balance my teaching stuff with my client work. But it's easy to sort of get tracked into to just do one or do the other, sort of say.
Yeah.
But let me just go over my notes also as well. If I was just also still missing things that but by the way, we're talking about the Corona. How is Corona also just influenced?
You're well prepared.
Huh? Oh, yeah.
You're well prepared.
Oh, yeah. Well, I have a couple of
first time, I think.
That's
I think for the first time, you're well prepared.
But about thanks. But about the Corona stuff. I mean, for you, for everybody, it really changed everything. But how has it changed teaching? I mean, you're doing a lot from home now, I guess, from with Zoom calls or whatever. And do you think it has maybe some brushing off effects that you think also can be positive, or do you think overall you prefer the way it was before, or what's your view on that?
I think that's a really difficult question. I don't like working from home. Let me start with that. That sort of bias everything that I say afterwards.
Okay.
I don't like work. I don't like working from home because I like to be around my colleagues. I also think I wouldn't be happy if I would do only freelance work from home. I like that I don't have to travel. I like that I can spend more time at home with my girlfriend, with my dog. I have more time for myself. I can do more chores in the house. I can work on my house. But the flip side is that I don't see as many people.
Yeah.
And that's the same thing true with students. I don't see as many students. And the less that when you haven't met someone in person, right? Or you've met them maybe once or twice, it's difficult to get a good reading on them.
Yeah.
And I think especially for the student-lecturer relationship, I should be able to read my students. I should be able to see how they are doing. Now, I think I am able to, and we're getting just really good results with our current first years, and we're getting really good results with many other years as well. So I think in terms of performance and the way they relate to the education, I don't think there's a big issue there, but it's more of a personal one. Does that answer your question?
Well, I guess you kind of lack the connection with your students, but is there also like things that you see as positive, or is it mostly sort of a negative thing that you think? Because in terms of remote working for me, I kind of get it. Like, it's not nice being locked in the house, but in terms of, for example, remote freelancing stuff, I also see a lot of positive sides to that, and I can imagine that it might also be the case for education. So it's like, do you also see positives, or is it mostly like I kind of wish to go back to kind of how it was with the just going into college every day? And I
think my answer is a little bit more nuanced. I think I think it's a good development that we see now that online education or online freelance work, or just simply offsite employment, can be as effective as on-site employment. And then I'm simply talking about like cost reduction, time reduction, investment reduction. I think on the flip side of it, the danger of that is that, I don't know if you noticed this, but I noticed this, that when I'm having a meeting with someone, it's very to the point, and there's no time for like this type of banter, right? There's this type of, you walk into the room, you say, hey man, hi Dave, how was your holiday? And then Dave's like, yeah, I had a great time. I went with the kids, yada, yada, blah, blah, blah. That conversation is gone. So it's very to the point. There's not much room for humorous banter chats.
Yeah.
There's no touching, Yeah. It's a big one. And so it's much less personal. So I think in the long run, I don't think the way we're doing offsite working is maintainable. Maybe for some people, not for everyone. But I do think that as much on-site working as we did before is not necessary.
Yeah,
I think...
So like a hybrid would be probably prefer. Yeah, I kind of feel the same as well about that. I do like the kind of general direction of like being able to work like more from home. Also with like freelance workers, like there were some studios, for example, that I worked with and they didn't have a proper remote pipeline. And then sometimes I got a call like, oh, you need to do these. Okay, can you come on and like need to do some fixes? And like, if it's like 10 minutes of work, I'm not going to go like travel 1.5 hours to go there to make tiny fixes. And then, but now all of that stuff is resolved. So, because now they kind of course that's different from the teaching part of it, but
actually, I prefer that type of thing, like that type of, hey, I have a problem, can you have a look at it? That type of thing is the same, really. I mean, we were doing in-person teaching, of course, right? We were doing 2 full days a week. We're doing in-person classes. Well, now we've simply moved those in-person classes to online format. So what we do is we're available the whole day. On that day, we give the class in the morning and in the afternoon. And then we're available for questions. We do our rounds, let's say. We meet up in little groups. So the conversation stays alive. So that's okay. Another thing that we're already doing is we put all of our lectures on a localized network for ourselves, right? So the students can reach those files. So if a student misses the lecture for whatever reason, they couldn't be there in person or they couldn't be there online, the lecture is recorded and it goes onto a platform, our own internal platform. Now, the easy thing about that is it's far easier to upload a video than it is to give a lecture, right? So in some cases, when there are minor issues, what we do is since we have this platform and we see everyone's responses trickle in, we can say, okay, there's 12 people with this issue. Instead of addressing every single one of them and take, 5 hours, 6 hours to address all of them, we could now grab all of them together and they'd be online anyway.
Yeah.
And we'd address them specifically. Or when we think this is a problem that is going to arise again next year and then the year after, what we do is we make a video in which we do a detailed explanation of the problem. And we give them some pointers to fix it. We upload that, we link it to them, and they can watch it on their own time. They can watch it 2 times, 3 times, 12 times. I don't know how many times they want. So that type of education now becomes much more accessible and very specific as well. And so that is, I think, a good side of it.
Yeah. And one more thing that I want to cover also about the education side, and after that also we've been going for quite a while, but like let's just cover a couple more things. They would like.
Oh shit!
What?
Oh, I swear it. Bleep it.
Oh no, it's okay. Shit. Okay, but about education, because that's something I'm kind of in between. Because like I get questions also. About that a lot is like people asking me like, yeah, should I go to college to study for CG? And like what I always say is like, you don't necessarily need to go study for this. Like a good route would also be to just learn some stuff on your own, then take an internship, try to get an internship and learn that way. But like, what are your views on that? Because I mean, you're a full-time lecturer, so I assume you might have different view on that. Because there's so much stuff also.
You mean I might be biased?
Yeah, you might be biased because like that's because there's so much stuff you can learn online nowadays. And I mean, production stuff you cannot learn online, but you can learn that, I guess, during an internship. And I guess it depends on the school, but like the study that I did, I don't necessarily feel that I learned that much over there. It wasn't necessarily a great study. And like, if I'm looking back at that, I think my time might have been better spent just like teaching myself. But I do feel like NLTV is a much better school than what I did. So I feel like it might be different also from the school that you're in. But like, what's your view on that? Like, would you say it's definitely a positive to just really go to like come over here, come learn it here, or are you? Well, you kind of understand what I mean. I mean,
I understand what you mean.
Yeah.
I think something like ends justify the means. Not in a negative sense, but it depends on where you want to go. So I think if we're talking about your situation specifically, I would say maybe you're right. Probably you're right. You're working in the Netherlands. You're working a freelance job. You have a very specialized field that is so specialized that it's very difficult to find any adequate, fully comprehensible material on that, especially 10 years ago. Right now, that's very different, but 10 years ago for sure. So I'd say for you, I think for your situation, that's a correct assumption, I think. I will say, though, that with the bachelor or with the master's, if you have plans on working abroad, which a lot of our students have, it's easier to go there.
Yeah, okay.
So, for example, if you want to migrate or emigrate to Canada, that company has to make a case with their government. We need someone with this specialty. Then the government asks, can you not find someone in the country with that specialty? They say no, because reasons. One of those reasons is always bachelor degree or master's degree. That's just an easier way into a different country. If you don't have that degree, it becomes significantly harder to prove for that company for you to move there. I think additionally, it's a level of critical thinking that you learn at a higher education. So I think especially with a bachelor's or a master, I think it helps you. I have to be correct in this. I don't want to offend people that they're not being critical thinkers if they don't have that. But it helps you build that critical thinking library, let's say. Yeah. So it gives you. Let's say it hands you considerations for a multitude of situations in which you are maybe through the help of that education now more capable of making an informed decision with a certain set of inputs. Let's say, I don't know, work placement, maybe income, maybe family.
Yeah. So it's yes.
And then,
sorry, continue. Now, because I was gonna say that. So it kind of teaches you a broader thing than just this work. It teaches you more of a broader thing that might also apply to other parts of your life and career. That's kind of also what you're.
Yeah. I think with a study like this, I think content of it is important, but I think it's much less about content than it is about preparing you for or helping you ease into the next phase in your life. Someone who finishes, for example, I think. Of course, I have no data to back this up. I'm just thinking this. I think someone who finishes an HBO, or that's a higher education bachelor's, it will be easier for them to move into a job that they initially wanted to be in when they started that bachelor's than if they wouldn't do it that way. Maybe that 4-year detour through the bachelor's shaves off 2 years of that journey. I don't know. It could be.
Yeah.
I think content of the education is less important than the fact that you've went through it.
Okay. So to also kind of have proven that you kind of can deal with certain things, like if they get you in as just an intern, also there's no like you might have a good portfolio of like I did these things, but you don't have the underlying thing. I guess that might also maybe depend a little bit on where you live, because for example the visa stuff, if you live in the United States, that's not necessarily a thing to consider, because you can get plenty of jobs there, and also education in the United States is super expensive, while in the Netherlands it's pretty affordable. So I can imagine that in the United States, you might then still be like, okay, maybe it's not worth it spending 100K on an education. While in the Netherlands, it's...
Well, of course. It's a very localized opinion, of course. I mean, I'm from the Netherlands. I've been through the Dutch education system. Yeah. Yes, I have a study loan. No, it's not huge. So, it's a consideration from this area. If you're from an area where it's super expensive to do this, of course your opinion is going to be very different. Yeah. And of course, at some point, maybe you spend, 20K on doing Nomon courses or doing, you watch YouTube videos and you learn everything from, maybe the Intagma guys. Whereas you would spend $100,000 on a 3-year education. Yeah. Okay. I wouldn't do that either. That's smart. But in the Netherlands, that situation is different.
Yeah. Okay.
So my opinion is purely based on the Dutch education system.
Yeah, okay, it makes sense. Well, it was interesting because that's like just something that I think is interesting, and I think there's this mindset of everybody that they need to go to college to do certain things, and like I'm not sure with this industry, but it was interesting to hear your take on it. And I think I'm almost go through. Well, I was going to ask you some stuff about Ubisoft and the game you worked on, but you cannot really say a lot about that. Right.
Yeah, I'd have to verify first what I can and cannot say. So until that time, I have my pictures that I received that I can put on my portfolio website. But then
Yeah, so I guess let's like if people find it interesting, like let me know, and then hopefully you like maybe we can have you back at some point. And also my camera, apparently the battery is almost empty. So let's just I have it plugged in. Well, now I have it plugged in, but always when I have it plugged in, it still drains like very slowly for some reason. Wait,
I have the same thing. I have the same thing with my laptop. I have my laptop, and by default, you're gone. Oh, there you are.
Oh, yeah, it's okay. So I think it might break. If it does before we end it up, I'm gonna put in a new battery. So then we're gonna be back. But I think I went through all the points. And I think it was actually pretty. We went on for like 1.5 hours or something. Like pretty long.
Bumbling.
Yeah, exactly. I still need to.
Which one's gonna be?
Yeah, I think rambling, but I'm not sure what the name is gonna be. I guess by the time you're watching this, then you know. But I think it was super interesting. We covered really a wide range of stuff, and like not just about work, but also about general things. What I think is something that's like that a lot of people are probably even more confused about than the work stuff itself, because the work stuff itself is pretty let's say not straightforward, but at least you kind of know where you're heading. While with the
this is the sort of the thing that makes, I guess, teaching students interesting. We're talking about students again. Yeah. It makes working with people interesting, right? The technique itself won't change as fast, but when you talk to a different person, they'll have a whole different view on things. Whether they agree or not, you have different perspectives. I like the question about the school. Should I go to this education? I think that's a super relevant question, especially now, the level of education out there, even though some of it is non-authored information, it's still super relevant, Yeah. I think it's interesting.
Yeah. All right, I guess before we round up, do you want to shill something? Like, do you want to mention something?
I think
you mentioned everything procedural. So I guess like once there is a date, the site was everythingprocedural.com, I think, right? So if people want to attend by the time it's online, they can go over there. I'll put a link to Pim's ArtStation in the description as well. And also before we go, what's your important question? What's your favorite cheese?
Oh man. I don't know, man. I always buy all types of cheeses. I like old, new. I like. Recently, I started liking blue cheese with port.
I love blue cheese.
But not really.
It does depend on the types of blue cheese, because I did a cheese night with some friends a while ago. We bought all kinds of cheese, and there was one, and like I really love like the really smelly cheese, but that one was like.
Too much.
No, it tasted like what's the stuff that comes from your pee? Like ammonia. It was really like and it was like ammonia like in your face.
Yeah, okay.
And it that was a little bit too intense for my taste, but it was still yeah. I mean, it was.
Sounds disgusting.
It was
Yeah.
like a little bit too extreme.
I like the softer cheeses more. I'm you know, I of course I like Gouda and you know all this stuff, but I used to be more about the soft cheese, and now I'm slowly moving into this territory of harder cheeses and like more, what do you call them? Pungent. I
guess you're maturing as a person, so also you like your cheeses to mature with you.
Yeah, slowly but surely. Maybe when I'm 50 or something, I'll like that ammonia cheese that you talk about.
Exactly. It's gonna be well, I guess that rounds up the all of the things. So super thanks for coming on as a guest for this first rambling session, I guess. And
rambling.
And I mean, of course, if you have questions to Pim, I guess leave it in the comments, and I guess you're gonna read the comments and maybe respond or something like that. So everybody, thanks for watching. Pim, thanks for being on, and I guess I'll talk to you outside of call again soon. So
at some point, yeah,
sending you weird videos on WhatsApp.
I wake up to this.
Yeah, exactly. Well, thanks, guys.